All right, what's going on, everyone? We had a little technical difficulty there. So this is part two of the Honest Hour, episode one. I almost forgot what the show was called. Am I coming through okay?
Yep.
Okay, so we were talking about if Trump gets elected, is it going to be good or bad? We disagree a bit. I think it's going to be better simply because it'll make them just intensify their insanity to the point where even people who identify pretty strongly with maybe the left, at a certain point it just gets too ridiculous to ignore. You disagree with that. You think it's actually going to go the other way. You think the people who might be more in the middle now, who might be more negotiable to some of this stuff, will actually double down and become more forgiving towards the social justice menace.
Yeah, and the reason why I say that is because you have a lot of anti-Trump sentiment, especially obviously on the left, and they're more likely to join forces with people who they normally wouldn't join forces with to essentially defeat what they possibly view to be a bigger menace. And the reason why I say this is because the people who generally hold these positions are, well, their premises are actually quite similar to, or at least more similar to, the people who are pulling the social justice crap than they are to the premises of Donald Trump, which means that they're going to view Donald Trump as a greater threat to their inherent goals, and therefore are going to be more likely to side with people who they agree more with.
That's very possible. I mean, what I would definitely say is that there's no way that this culture war is going to de-escalate no matter who gets elected.
Right, and that we absolutely agree on. I mean, if Hillary Clinton, obviously the establishment is going to continue to be all in favor of this issue, or mostly in favor of this SJW crap, whereas if Trump gets elected, it's going to basically, you're probably going to have a split. The country's elite is going to probably split in half in terms of who gets favored, who doesn't, so on and so forth. But either way, I'm worried mostly because of the whole authoritarian libertarian problem. I mean, I generally do lean libertarian, and Trump most certainly is not libertarian.
Yes.
He with respect, I mean, it's not about the label per se. In fact, it's not about label, since I generally dislike the whole big capital L libertarian. I even distance myself from the small L libertarian. It's the principles that he's not upholding which I take issue with. The idea of trying actively to intervene in trade and society, so on and so forth. I really don't like those ideas, which Trump most certainly is for to a certain extent, especially with respect to, obviously, immigration and multinational corporations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said earlier, this is personally a weaker aspect to his campaign that I'm not settled on. I'm trying to learn as much about trade as I can, but it's a very big topic, and I don't think I'm going to be able to understand it entirely. So I'll have to admit I'm rolling the dice there. It seems I see smart people, much more informed than I on both sides of the issue. It's like, well, people who have a lot of time to think don't agree on this. So yeah, that's a weakness, I would say, of him. But I might also push back and maybe point out that there are other countries that do practice protectionism to a pretty significant extent. I mean, Japan is is a pretty big example of this. You'll never see, specifically with the automobile industry, you'll never see American cars in Japan. They curtail their trade laws and tariffs and whatnot in such a way to make sure that their own industries are favored heavily at the expense of foreign industries. Now, Japan obviously has quite a few economic problems of its own, but I don't think any of them really have anything to do with trade per se. And I've seen a lot of people say that, well, if he starts putting tariffs on things, and if it's not a bluff, which is what I personally think it is. It's a bluff to
Mm-hmm.
get other countries to come to the table, but let's say they call it and he does it anyway. Well, assuming he keeps the jobs in the country, if things get a little bit more expensive, I think that's an acceptable trade-off. What would you say to that?
Perhaps. But again, who is this going to affect? It's going to affect precisely the people who he's claiming to help, namely the middle class and the lower class. Now, obviously, I, as some rich kid, well, kind of rich kid, I mean, I'm not going to be nearly as affected by this as other people are, but I mean, the fact is that the people whom this is going to affect are going to be the ones who he is supposedly helping get jobs. And though it might increase jobs, although then again they might just automate stuff, though it might increase jobs, what it's also going to do is increase prices, and the prices and the jobs may not be able to keep up with the prices. So you're going to have economic problems no matter what. I don't know. I mean, it's possible, and I would say that the social aspect of what Trump would do to the SJWs may be actually a counterbalance against the whole economic issue. But it's still a huge but, and I think that's where we both agree on.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say that in thinking about it overthinking about it over recent months, I've come to the conclusion that it's very possible that Trump is a better alternative than Hillary. I'm still not decided though on which one's better and which one's worse. So,
excuse me. I find at worst Trump is the average kind of bad you might get off of a politician. Like on a normal cycle, he probably wouldn't fly. But when you compare him to, I mean, as you know, I'm very deep in the Trump camp. So my capacity to look at this objectively, I kind of have to admit is diminished to a pretty significant extent. But I just can't see how people could say they're an equal choice. Like that, it's one like it could go either way, just on the candidates themselves, kind of keeping the larger context of society to the side, just looking at these two individuals. I just can't see how someone could run to the center and claim Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are comparably bad. Like,
there is a reason why I say this, and I think it's a relatively important one, which is, and this is the justification I've been using until, of course, the whole WikiLeaks and so on and so forth. Even after that, I used it for a while, and the thing is, I still somewhat agree with it. The problem is that Trump is inherently pro-radical change. And as much as Hillary Clinton goes off on how, I mean, she waves her arms and does the whole shtick about how she's going to completely change the country, the one thing that we can count on about Hillary Clinton, there are two things, is that she's going to benefit herself, and that the status quo currently benefits her, which means that she's probably going to keep the status quo. And I, as someone who generally likes slow change rather than a really fast political movement, I think that it's possible that that she's not really going to do a lot of what she says, which means who knows? My problem is that but the problem now is the fact that with Trump and the whole tax, she's going to be more pressed to do what she asked, because she will obviously want a re-election, which means that she's actually probably going to do a lot of the stuff. And I'm worried about that, especially on with respect to the gun laws, since I'm a huge gun fan. So that might raise a couple of issues for one of my hobbies. But I mean, it obviously goes deeper than that in terms of taxes and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, the problem is that before I wasn't completely. She may very well have been bluffing, considering the fact that she is, again, basically pro-establishment and pro-current situation, whereas Trump isn't. So I don't know. But at this point, I'm starting to favor Trump simply because I'm not so sure about that anymore.
Mm-hmm. So to bring it back onto SJWs specifically, what kind of person in their own like when it comes to their personal lives, what kind of person do you think it takes to believe the SJW theories? Because what I've personally noticed is that you're dealing a lot of the time with people who, they're not very sympathetic, but they have their own issues, and I've noticed they're using social justice as a way to act out on whatever these insecurities about their own personal lives. A lot of angry feminazis probably do have daddy issues. I mean, it sounds very crass. It sounds crass, I admit, but it's probably accurate. So I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think there's like a certain personality type that it takes to believe this stuff?
I don't really think it's personality. I think there are a couple of factors. One, you have the fact that if you notice, a lot of these people generally are upper middle class, and I think there are a couple of reasons for that. Mm-hmm. One, those are the people going to college these days. I mean, apart from the upper class. And second of all, they're the ones who stand to benefit most from a lot of this stuff, especially with regards to destroying capitalism. That sounds weird, but the fact is that a lot of these kids are worried about their ability to get jobs since they've been pampered their whole lives and don't have enough trust money or whatever to, basically never work. So that you have that aspect, and the other aspect is the fact that a lot of these people inherently come from the base assumption that equality is the main outcome. In other words, they to a certain extent, your comment about daddy issues is actually really pertinent here, because basically what they want is security. Mm-hmm. If you want security and you want equality, well, the SJW crowd is going to be very, very, very accepting of that. Mainly I think it has to do with base premises and what you're actually looking for. I mean, in my case, I want freedom and I want the ability to either succeed or fail as the economy and as other people see fit, and to prove my own worth to myself and others. They want a situation where there is a certain amount of they don't care if everyone ends up an equal ass loser as long as everyone is equal. It's the commentary that there was some woman who was pro-communist in some documentary, and she said, yes, we were all miserable, but we were all miserable together. Obviously, this isn't communism. It isn't close in terms of intensity or anything like that. But the mentality and the base assumptions and premises are, well, quite similar. Mm-hmm. Just they're coming at it, instead of class, they're coming at it from race, gender, ethnicity, so on and so forth.
Yeah, a lot of it seems like insecurity. I've noticed that a lot of the left, like I remember this story, not a story, a news report or something about this this professor type. I think he was a psychologist. He recommended that people should stop reading to their kids because not everybody has parents who read to their kids, and reading to your kids is like proven to be very good for their health and their development. So he's like, if you can't read, nobody can read. Let's all be illiterate together. Let's all be miserable together. It's this anger and resentment towards success, and that's seeing. I've heard people say that before about the left, kind of before I started getting really engaged in the culture war, and I always kind of dismissed it because it seemed very trite. But it's an observation I just keep coming to. It's like they're just not satisfied with anyone else who might seem to be more successful than others.
Yeah, no, you see this very clearly. I mean, look at the Chinese. They're now basically going after the Chinese. And actually, they're starting to go after the Jews too, because the Jews are too successful as well. Mm-hmm. The reason why not all that much anti-Semitism comes from the right anymore is because the left have taken over that, and the reason why you have very little racism towards Chinese from the right is the same thing, and it's been taken over again by the left because the Chinese have become extraordinarily successful in modern-day society, especially in the U.S., especially where I live. So, yes, there is this. The reason why people notice this eating one's own is definitely because the left hates success, or at least they hate success when everyone else is failing or when most other people are failing. They would rather that everyone fail than that some people be better than others.
Yes, it comes down to this equal opportunity at every cost, at all costs idea.
Yep. Another interesting thing that I've noticed, sort of off topic, but an interesting thing that I was thinking about recently. They also seem to take the attitude of quote unquote educating people, and it's not just an expression they use. If you notice the tone, when they want to essentially dictate their morals and their values to you, they act like they are speaking the undeniable truth. It's not an argument to them. They are dictating from heaven on high down to you, and you are to accept it no matter what. They're not there to have a discussion. They're teaching a class about the truth, rather than actually engaging with people to find out what the truth actually is.
Hey, can you give me 1 second?
Yeah.
I'm doing a video on my YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking to somebody.
Oh, I'm checking out stuff going on.
Okay, I'll do video for now. Hello?
Hello?
Alright, do you hear any of that?
Yep, a little bit, but...
Okay. Yeah, I'm staying at somebody's house right now.
No
A
worries.
relative of mine. Vacationing. But, I'm sorry, I forgot what you said. Can you please repeat it?
I was going off topic on the subject that they were that a lot of these SJWs seem to take the attitude that they're teaching you rather than actually having a discussion.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's such a power trip to a lot of them that I always also get a kick whenever they flap their degrees in my face. It's something they do a lot. And I don't know if it's just me, but I always think that, well, if you have to point out you have a degree, maybe, you didn't go there to learn anything. You just went there for the status.
Of course. No, that's why college is there now. It's not there for people to actually, learn anything. It's there for people essentially to... it's there for people to get jobs and flout elitism, essentially. It's there for people who want to act like elitist buttholes to be elitist buttholes. That's all it really is at this point. And it really pisses me off as someone who wants to actually learn something from college. Because it's essentially, now a lot of colleges are taking the attitude, you're just here to get a job, which is not what college should be about.
Yeah. I think way too many people are going to college in general.
I agree.
The more people who kind of go to college, kind of as a direct result, the less value each individual degree is going to have.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, supply and demand. I don't know. I guess on the subject of education, what was that?
One of the things that always tickles me about Bernie Sanders' plan to get free college education, it's not going to get you a better education or a better job. It's just going to devalue the degree.
Yeah.
But
there's such a pet peeve of mine. I hate when people say, I want free tuition. It's like, no, you don't. You want people like me who are not going to go to college and going to go out to work to pay for you through my tax money. Yep. Now, you can say that. You can say, I want this subsidized by the government, but don't fucking say it's free. I'm sorry, that's just such a pet peeve of mine. It's like instant rage.
Yeah.
But,
I know.
Yeah, the left has definitely turned education into this big social experiment project. It used to be that, like decades ago, way before either of us were born, that higher education, and probably just education in general, was very much meant to reward smart people. When now it's meant to bring up the absolute bottom of the barrel in society in terms of intelligence. And
Yeah.
it's a noble idea, but I don't know how much you read about IQ and the degree to which it's heritable and it's genetic. But there's a kind of growing body of evidence to suggest that people's IQs are, by and large, generally fixed at a young age, kind of around puberty. And you can obviously always, get more informed and kind of improve your critical thinking skills. But if somebody is 18 and 19 and they've never practiced rational thinking in their life, they're not suddenly going to learn how to do it through 4 years in a college classroom. And it's part of what's fueling this huge bubble of people who take extraordinarily huge loans, tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, and by the time they get out, they have very little opportunity because a lot of other people did that as well, and now the kind of pool of labor has become a bit saturated. And then they get angry and mad, and then they go on Tumblr and become SJWs. I think we've come full circle now.
Yeah, pretty much. And of course, the reason it doesn't help matters that professors are also professing this SJW crap, which, as I said before, is mostly where it originates.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it does come full circle, and it's kind of sad because a lot of these kids, all they really wanted was a job, and they were duped into thinking that they need college to get a job.
Yep.
I don't remember
seeing one pro employment ad in my guidance counselor's office. You know what I mean? Like nothing. They were all supportive of more college. I had to just kind of go on the internet and do my own researching because I don't have a huge amount. I mean, I'm not poor or anything, but I do not have tons of money to be spent doing this. And just my own personality, I hate the idea of being in debt to anybody. I just, even if I owe you like $5, it just really irritates me, and I just rush to pay them off.
Trust me, I'm the same way. I hate being in debt, which is one of the reasons why I've been trying to get it so that I am going somewhere where I'm not going to be in debt. And even though, I've been saving and my parents have been saving, it's still a situation where, well, my choices are limited because the government subsidized loan companies, and then prices increased, and then people ask, well, why did the prices increase? I thought the idea was that, people get, quote-unquote, free education by loans, and it's not the way it works, buddy.
Yeah, whenever the government subsidizes something, it goes up. Whether it's like subsidizing corn, like out west, or I guess for you out east. You get more corn every year than you need. If you subsidize poor behaviors that people kind of fall into, well, you're going to get more of it because you've removed the punishment. As harsh as it might be, you remove the punishment for making foolish decisions. So the number just goes up and up and up until, I don't know. I mean, people talk about like the student loan bubble bursting. I mean, I think there's more student debt now than credit card debt.
Wow.
It's like $1.3 trillion as of like a year or two ago. It's fucking huge. Like you could buy like half of Africa with that much money. I mean,
yeah, no, it's absolutely ridiculous. But there you go. That's what happens when you have SJWs take control of a certain aspect, or even liberals in general. I mean, I don't know. It's a situation where every time that they have this great idea to essentially get another way to indoctrinate people, it ends up backfiring on them. And, well, it doesn't really, I guess, because that means that more people turn out to be equal-ass losers, and that they all end up with debt, and they can't pay it off no matter what. In some ways, I mean, I suppose that's exactly what they want.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the professors who are kind of the, preachers, if you will, in this big cathedral of madness. Yep. They, and this is just kind of going into why I really don't like the education industry. They don't pay any price for being wrong. Like, they don't lose their jobs. Their reputation doesn't get discredited. There's no consequences. And I mean, if the bubble pops, which it will eventually, if nothing is done and it's just allowed to fester, well, ultimately they're kind of isolated from the consequences, because if they're tenured, then they probably already have a nice retirement package, and they'll check out a little bit early.
And the student unions don't help either. The teachers' unions don't help either.
No, not one bit.
Especially when we're talking about high school and middle school. I mean, a lot of the teachers who are pushing political agendas where they really shouldn't be are staying in places where they shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was that case, I think that it was actually in New York, where a bunch of kids who were white were basically told that they were evil, and they come home crying to their mothers, saying, "I feel like a bad person," and nothing was done because reasons.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
Yeah,
it's seeping down lower and lower. I hope we're not convincing our listeners to feel too bad for SJWs. not my intention. I don't feel very bad for them. I don't sympathize with them. I just empathize with some of the other circumstances that you just keep seeing a lot of SJWs find themselves in.
Yeah. But a lot of SJWs find themselves in circumstances which are largely a consequence of their own idiocy, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
But I suppose that's why they want to mitigate the consequences, because they know that they're going to end up in this situation, and therefore, well, I mean, the most logical thing for them to do is to prevent it. And the way to prevent it is to force everyone else to pay for it, and to force everyone else to feel guilty.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is why you have white guilt all over the place, is because this is the way that people who are, quote-unquote, underprivileged, who don't succeed, can bash people with.
Yeah, I mean, and that just exasperates the problem even further, especially in minority communities, the constant deflecting of responsibility. I mean, to whatever capacity there is to improve, which I personally think there's a lot of, you just rule it out immediately by rushing into the victim matrix.
It's the bigotry of low expectations, essentially.
Yep. I was always amazed that it was actually George H. No, it was W. who actually said that first. Like, I guess everybody's right at least once.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that guy got a lot wrong, but he said stuff that was actually somewhat smart every once in a while.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man.
But there you go. I think that, though, that the real problem does come from the universities, and I'm not sure why they would continue to do this, because we've seen this in Mizzou, where enrollment has dropped however much because of the more the prominence of the neo-progressive crap that's been going on there.
Mm-hmm.
The professors, so on and so forth. I mean, but they perpetrated this for whatever reason, and now they're losing it. And people still buy this. It's kind of amazing. It's like they don't want to admit that this isn't going to get them what they want. This is what happens when you have a narrative and you're not seeking truth. Mm-hmm. You're instead seeking to prove your narrative.
Yeah, I think Mizzou had ended up closing down a whole dormitory. Due to lack of enrollment. I don't know if I might have mentioned this to you before. There was a study done that I did a video on about there's more like the new generation. I think we talked about this before about younger
Yeah.
people being more conservative.
Right.
And
Yeah, I saw.
yeah, I guess this ties back into what we were talking about earlier. This is the year of the counter movement because you're going to have more and more people who, young people who are very in tune with the internet. If the mainstream outlets, quote unquote, won't cover these kind of subjects, well, somebody else will, whether it's a Sargon or a TLD or whomever.
Yep.
And it's going to start hurting them in the wallets. You think that might motivate them, but SJWs don't tend to be very good with money, from what I can tell. They tend just to get by on Patreon donations.
Well, I mean, that's you do realize that's why they go after. That's why they started losing money. It's once they kicked out the Asians and the Jews, they started losing money because we're the only ones who know how to help them.
Yeah, exactly.
But
I mean, come
there
on.
you go. I mean, this happens every time someone kicks out either group.
Yeah, if someone's named Wu or Goldstein, keep them around because you're going to need the extra cash one day. And this is just common sense.
No, but in all seriousness, I mean, the thing is that it has less to do with them being bad with money, and it more has to do with, again, the fact that they're blind to a narrative that they want to push. And the fact is that the people who go after this stuff, especially the younger people, which is diminishing more and more, is because they view it as a counterculture. But more and more people are starting to see the BS of that, are starting to see that feminism and social justice, so on and so forth, is the status quo. And if it's the status quo, well, generally teenagers are going to go against it automatically.
Mm-hmm.
And since it's viewed as the establishment because, well, it is, well, there you go.
Mm-hmm. Of course, they're the ones who think they're the revolutionaries.
Of course, because that's what feminism was based on. Again, it's the same premise of women are underprivileged because that's what it was at the time, and the movement really hasn't modernized. And because they haven't, and for the same reason, they haven't realized that now they're the establishment. So one of the other premises is that feminism is still the underdog. It's the same thing, by the way, with Christianity. I mean, if you think about it, the two act very similarly. They're both preaching to and assuming that people don't know about the religion of Christianity or the religion of feminism.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same sort of preaching that goes on in both groups.
Yeah, it's a religion.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly at least a religion to the extent that it involves people's emotions to a very severe degree.
Well, not only that, I mean, compare, for example, a chick tract where every character except for the good guy is completely ignorant of Christianity, and compare that to the feminism videos where they assume that no one knows about what feminism really is. It's the same thing, just with a different. It's with a different devil. It's with a different Jesus, and it's with a different religion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I've come to see more as feminism as an ideology, as something that's always been like this, and it's just had varying periods where it was more intense. Do you think there was a time when this movement or ideology, because I see the other stuff when it comes to race and sexuality is kind of branchings off of feminism. I don't know if I'm correct on that, but I think it is the kind of ground zero. It would start with gender and then hopscotched its way around to all these other identities. Do you think it had a noble purpose in the beginning at all? Like, I mean, I'm talking back like 100 years or so.
Yes. That sounds strange, and I need to explain why. Because the purpose essentially was noble. The idea was that women didn't have something that men had. It was a right that women supposedly didn't have and that men had. And so they were obviously going to fight for that right. The problem is, of course, that women actually technically did have that right. It was a technicality of the law that they didn't have it, but leaving that aside. The thing is that the goal of feminism, if you take all their premises to be correct, was noble. The problem is that they had, again, certain fundamental principles and certain fundamental premises that were not legitimate. That, for example, that women are always oppressed. Again, technically, kind of, sort of, maybe true for the time. Not so much after, especially the 60s. So the main problem with feminism is that you see this sort of thing with most ideologies, where once they start dying out, once the movement starts dying out, they try to expand into other regions where they try to find a way to keep going. You saw this with Gamergate, where Gamergate tried to revive itself, essentially by claiming, "Oh, we're not done because we haven't completely achieved our goals," when they had.
Yeah, it's called mission creep.
Yep.
It's like you set up all this apparatus of a movement. You accomplish what you want, and then people get attached to it. They make friends. They get invested, and they just want it to keep going.
Precisely. And I'm glad that Gamergate died. Not because I disagree with Gamergate. I agree with Gamergate completely, but I would not want to see the monster that it turned into after, even 6 months, especially since it was a smaller movement. With feminism, of course, it took a lot longer for the nasty aspects to become much more exposed, but it did become much more exposed pretty rapidly.
I think you mentioned earlier, that they always like to frame things in terms of victim and oppressor. I think one of the reasons why they always fall into this dichotomy is because when they look at how people, the roles that men and women have in society, they never take into consideration responsibilities and the way that off-puts rights. I mean, for instance, if you look at the suffragettes, women couldn't vote. By and large, true. They also weren't drafted. If you gave someone, if you took the gender aspect out of it and just said, hey, you're going to be born, and you can, not have any direct say in the political process. I mean, you can indirectly affect things yourself, and you won't have certain obligations expected of you. Or B, you have a say in it, but you're going to have to share the load in the kind of more physical aspects of maintaining a society. I mean, once you take the gender out of it, it really boils down to what an individual would prefer. I mean, I would probably personally prefer the latter, but that's definitely not everyone. And that's something I've never seen them even remotely take into account. It's always just a two-dimensional plane to them, when really it's three-dimensional.
Right. No, that's very, very true. And the problem is that a lot of this actually was taken, I think, from Marxist theory. And the idea of victim and oppressor, of course, they stole that directly from the whole thing of the evil from the evil bourgeoisie versus the glorious proletariat revolution. Sorry, bad Russian accent. I know.
It wasn't bad.
Well, thanks. Considering that I study Russian, that's a good thing that it wasn't too bad. But anyway, it's the same idea though, except this time it's the non-gender binary fluffballkin table chair queer whatever will rebel against the cis white heteronormative male evil patriarch. It's simply again like with feminism and Christianity, just change one term for another, and you end up with essentially the same ideology or the same idea perpetrated again. In fact, you can do this with pretty much any authoritarian ideology. The inherent goals are pretty much the same. The Nazis did this with the Romani and the Jews. Replace men with Romani or Jews, or the Rom and the Jews, and you have a Nazi instead of a feminist. So, I mean, I think that this is common to most authoritarian ideologies. They need to make themselves seem like the underdog, because otherwise they gain no legitimacy with especially with younger people, who are the main ones who you need to convince if the ideology is going to continue to survive.
Yeah, and I guess that's why they want education so badly.
Yep.
They're willing to throw everything else under the bus if they would lose that. I personally think that's because if you can sorry I'm tripping over my words a bit, but if you can if you can control the education, then regardless of the merit of what you have to say, you can guarantee that what you have to say will have to be taken seriously.
Right, because by education, you can control what happened in the past. By controlling the past, you control the present. By controlling the present, you control the future. I mean, that is one of the lines from 1984, which is one of the most relevant, I think, here.
Yeah, that's some Dr. Evil level stuff.
Complete with Pinky.
Oh yes, glorious Pinky. But the Pinky has to be, nail polished rainbow, and
yeah.
Probably,
instead of asking,
probably pierced as well.
Not only that, instead of asking for $1 billion, you have to ask for 1 billion Mexican pesos, which really doesn't amount. The peso sucks, but whatever.
Yeah. I think we covered a lot of ground. We were definitely wandering through topics. I'm ready to finish this up. If there's anything you want to say?
No, not really. I think we've covered quite a bit here. So.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Thank you again, Nathaniel, for joining me. I hope we can.
Thank you for having me.
No problem, man. Seriously, if you haven't checked out his channel, it's how do you pronounce your channel? Actually, it's Meshuggah something.
Meshuggah Incarnate.
Meshuggah Incarnate. Where's that name from? I meant to ask you.
Well, Meshuggah is Hebrew for crazy, and it comes from the Yiddish Meshuggah. So it's the noun form of craziness, and then the adjective is Meshuggah, but I use the noun form, obviously.
Oh, okay.
So.
All right, cool. A little bit of Hebrew lore is what you're going to get over at Nathaniel's channel, as well as a lot of very insightful commentary as well. All right, man. Thanks for coming and talking to me. Thanks everybody for listening. Sorry this had to get split up into 2 videos. I'm also sorry if the sound quality is not the greatest. I'm still working on very, very basic equipment. I will be improving that very shortly. If you like it, leave a like and a comment. Peace out.